All right, so we're back for episode 2 of the mini-series on how to bust the stigma of mental illness in society. This video is covering all things personality disorders, which is honestly one of my favorite things to talk about in mental health and in psychology in general. So yeah, enjoy.
All right, so the way that I'm gonna break it down for you, or the way that I guess personality disorders are broken down in general. There's 3 clusters of personality disorders, clusters A, B, and C, and there's 10 personality disorders that are recognized in the 3 clusters. So what I'm gonna do is break down the 3 clusters, tell you why they're there, what they are, and what the clusters mean, and then we're going to get into each personality disorder to give you a better idea of what the personality disorder is and looks like. So here we go. I feel like I have to explain what a personality is in order to understand how a personality can be termed like disorderly, I guess. So a personality is just basically, these traits that we identify with and identify others with that make someone unique, make someone who they are. So someone's personality can basically be used to kind of predict and spell out how we expect someone to act in a given social situation.
Today, Junior?
Throughout the video, as I'm going into each personality disorder, you might find yourself identifying with some of the traits that I'm describing, or, oh, I know someone who acts like that sometimes, but it's important to remember, in order to be able to be diagnosed, this has to be an enduring and persistent pattern of behavior that's getting in the way of someone functioning from day to day.
That's right. That is right.
So to dive right into it, the first personality disorder cluster is the A cluster. And this is characterized by odd or eccentric behaviors and personality types. So the 3 personality disorders that are in cluster A are paranoid personality disorder, schizoid personality disorder, and schizotypal personality disorder. And if you can't tell just from the names, these disorders are believed to be linked to schizophrenia, which we will cover later on in the series. So getting right into the first personality disorder, paranoid personality disorder, these are people that are defined by like suspiciousness and hostility toward social interaction. They see themselves as extremely vulnerable, believing that they will be mistreated and exploited by others in any given social context. They see others as devious and manipulative, and in some way they're always plotting against them. As a result, they're constantly seeking to ensure loyalty of even their closest peers. And when they feel like they're being plotted against, they react with hostility and anger towards them.
Good, great, grand, wonderful. No yelling on the body.
Schizoid personality disorder affects less than 1% of the population and is characterized by a lack of interpersonal relationships and a lack of desire for those interpersonal relationships.
You want me to express myself? Leave me alone!
People with schizoid personality disorder have an extremely diminished capacity and ability to respond to any type of social stimuli, and that includes the ability to communicate. So their communication skills are extremely diminished as well. People with schizoid personality disorder generally have a hard time like laughing on cue and struggle with other things that you and I probably take for granted on an everyday basis. This generally causes them to come off as either not interested or incompetent, or sometimes to be described as aloof or unaware. The third and final cluster A personality disorder is schizotypal personality disorder. Schizotypal personality disorder has to do with everything relating to destiny and the fact that even the smallest things that seem unrelated somehow greatly affect the individual. Something like opening a textbook to page 147, in someone with schizotypal personality disorder, this will tell them something about what is going to happen in the future. So because of their distorted cognition and perceptions and odd beliefs, it leads to not a lot of social interaction, and that's why it's kind of clustered in that cluster A category with paranoid and schizoid. So although all 3 of these disorders are believed to be linked in some way to schizophrenia, it's important to mention that people with these personality disorders do not experience any of the positive symptoms that come along with schizophrenia, meaning that they don't hear voices or see things that aren't there. So we'll cover more on schizophrenia later in the series, but for now, just know that there's a linkage between the personality disorder and the actual illness of schizophrenia itself. So next we have cluster B personality disorders, and these disorders are characterized by dramatic, emotional, and erratic personality types.
This is that emotional stuff I was talking about.
People with cluster B personality disorders generally show a lack of impulse control and a lack of ability to show empathy.
Maybe if I don't blink, my eyes will tear up.
They have problems regulating emotion and suffer from extreme mood swings. They're generally emotionally unstable.
Get out! Get out! Hey you! Leave the jacket and get out!
Research has shown a genetic link between cluster B personality disorders and mood disorders, whereas like depression and bipolar disorder, as well as an increased risk for substance abuse, which we will cover in the next episode. Episode 3 is going to be mood disorders. So there's 4 disorders in cluster B, and those are antisocial, borderline, narcissistic, and histrionic personality disorder. There's a wasp like right outside my window. So the first personality disorder in cluster B is borderline personality disorder, and this is actually the most studied personality disorder out there. It affects approximately 1.6% of the population, and it's mostly diagnosed in women. So borderline personality disorder is characterized by extreme mood instability and mood regulation, meaning that they have extreme mood swings, often becoming very angry very quickly.
Get out!
People with borderline personality disorder act impulsively and may act impulsively in self-damaging ways, meaning that they partake in substance abuse or unsafe sex life or have eating disorders that somehow damage the self. People with borderline personality disorder often have trouble keeping interpersonal relationships with others. It's kind of like the Sour Patch thing, where it's first they're sour, then they're sweet, but in reverse. A relationship might start off great with someone with borderline personality, but then out of the blue, they'll just switch up and it'll turn sour very quickly. Finally, people with borderline personality disorder suffer from an extreme fear of abandonment, and that kind of is what contributes to those diminished relationships. Next, we have histrionic personality disorder, and these are people who are extreme in seeking attention and excessively seek attention. These people are extremely suggestible and are easily influenced. People with histrionic personality disorder do anything in their power to get the attention back to them and maintain it over time. People with histrionic personality disorder are described as flamboyant and theatrical, but also egotistical and again shallow. So this type of behavior leads to a lot of like acquaintances and people that they kind of know, but very few, if any, real relationships. The third personality disorder in cluster B is antisocial personality disorder, and this affects roughly 3% of the population. These are individuals who act deceitfully and with intent to manipulate others in their own gain. They're aggressive in their behavior, and a good way to think of someone with antisocial is like the typical middle school bully.
Hey, look! Sergeant Dork!
The biggest characteristic of antisocial is impulsivity and lack of empathy for others. So the final cluster B personality disorder is narcissistic personality disorder. So these people have a grandiose sense of self-importance, and they see themselves as, more attractive, smarter, and just overall better than everyone else, and expect to be treated as such. These people often fantasize about unlimited success or wealth or power, and are completely distraught when something brings them back to reality. It completely shatters their self-image, and this is because behind that mask that they put up of being more important than everyone, they have a very diminished self-esteem and a deep need for admiration.
I still love you.
Alright, and that brings us to cluster C personality disorders, and these are generally people who are described as being avoidant or fearful. These are people who have their whole life centered around anxiety and being afraid of some cornerstone part of their life.
What if there's no room for a ribbon drawer because the baby stuff takes up all the space? Where will all the ribbons go?
People with cluster C personality disorders generally have a low sense of self-esteem and are so fearful that their symptoms become debilitating. The first cluster C personality disorder is avoidant personality disorder, and this has to do with an extreme fear of rejection and anxiety around rejection in general. People with avoidant personality disorder overanalyze their social environment and blow any minor social cue way out of proportion and take it as though they're being rejected by their peers. This is the person that literally cannot show up to a job interview or takes someone canceling plans as completely dismissing the entire friendship. And they see themselves as inferior in almost any social situation. Next, we have dependent personality disorder, and this is characterized by the psychological need to be cared for by someone else. Again, they have low self-esteem and see themselves as incapable of taking care of themselves. They feel as if they can't make decisions on their own, and they're uncomfortable when being left alone. With that being said, they're much more likely to maintain an abusive or neglectful relationship, and stemming off that, they engage in a new relationship after a breakup, very quickly. Finally, we have obsessive compulsive personality disorder, and this is different from the anxiety disorder. Obsessive compulsive personality disorder is actually the most common personality disorder, and these are people who are obsessed with orderliness, cleanliness, and following the rules.
The rule says play it as it lies.
These are perfectionists who always have to be in control of every aspect of life.
Everything is supposed to be perfect. This is an omen that my marriage is doomed and I'm gonna get divorced just like my parents and everybody else in my family.
And I say they have to be controlled, but they have to be controlled to a point of knowing every little detail about their day. They often don't partake in leisure activities, including friendships, because they're so obsessed with following the rules of society.
And I do ask that when you're not using the markers, you put the caps back on them because they will dry out.
It's not abnormal for people with obsessive compulsive personality disorder to become extremely devoted to either work or school. And these people are so rigid in their beliefs and their own rules that they're often seen as uncompromising, unreliable, and almost impossible to work with.
Alright, yeah, so that was it. That was everything you need to know about personality disorders. Well, not everything, obviously, but now you know a little bit more. So, as always, thank you for watching. Please like the video, share it, and subscribe if you want. I will see you guys next time to cover mood disorders. I'm off to go watch the Browns game and make some pasta, so go Brownies!